The protagonist of the story is Machio Hiraku. Currently, he is living a dream life with beautiful girls in a new world. Here, Hiraku has become a farmer, and with his amazing farming skills, he has built a beautiful world of his own. Hiraku himself can't believe that after death, he has the life he always wanted. Going back many years, unable to fight a terminal illness, Hiraku died in his hospital bed at the age of 39. Thinking that everything was over, Hiraku unexpectedly finds himself back as a spirit. The person standing before him is the supreme deity who governs the world. He says that Hiraku's life, both betrayed and afflicted with a terminal illness, was due to his own negligence. To compensate for this, the supreme deity has decided to grant Hiraku a new life with a healthy, disease-free body. Hiraku is overjoyed and says he wants to be given a new life. Farming. While lying in his sickbed, he was watching a program about farming idols that he had always longed for. After hearing it, God immediately connected with the god of agriculture to negotiate. After receiving his agreement, God granted Hiraku a life of farming, a healthy body, and an overpowered ability called the all-purpose farming tool. Suddenly, Hiraku woke up to find himself in a forest. He hadn't been able to move his body since being in the sickbed. His mind was brimming with the spirit of farming now that he had been reborn. The first thing Hiraku thought of was to go to the forest, because in all directions there was nothing but desert and no one living there. Hiraku looked at his clothes. They were indeed those of a real farmer. He activated his all-purpose farming tool ability and created a hoe. Hiraku didn't know what kind of magic created it, because when he picked it up, it felt very light, even when hoeing hard ground or tree roots. After working hard for a while, Hiraku realized he needed to find water and food. He went around, listening for any nearby rivers or streams, but there was no sound except the rustling of leaves. After walking a short distance, he found a very large tree in a prime location, so he decided to use it as his base and continue searching. Since there were no rivers or streams, Hiraku used his all-purpose farming tools to create a shovel to dig a well for groundwater. After digging for a while, he finally reached an underground water source. The water problem was solved, and the next step was food. Surprisingly, Hiraku wasn't hungry yet, so he continued using his all-purpose farming tools to clear the area. To create a field, he had to cut down a somewhat cumbersome tree. He created an axe and tried to chop it down from both sides, but unexpectedly, with just one chop, the tree fell. This made him run away in disbelief that the all-purpose farming tool was so powerful. This time, he created a frame that easily peeled and cut the tree into sections, then a hook to pull other trees from afar back to his base. After gathering enough wood to build a hut, it was almost dark. Hikaru was worried about where he would stay that night, or how to start a fire. Matches burned out quickly, so he had to think of something more efficient. Thinking about his physics knowledge, he created a magnifying glass to get fire from the sun. Just then, the sun set, but luckily, the night sky unexpectedly brightened. Perhaps there were 2 moons here, so Hikaru could see clearly. He then created some more household items from wood. After a night of hard work, it was morning. Hikaru took his cup down to the well to drink water, but he suddenly remembered something more important, getting fire from the sun. Then he continuing his work, clearing the surrounding area to create a large field. He was thinking about what he would eat for lunch, when suddenly, a rabbit swooped down from afar. He was so hungry, and suddenly food was offered right to his mouth. After enjoying this gift from nature, Hiraku decided to build a toilet to relieve himself. He immediately used all his construction knowledge to create it, and after completing it, Hiraku felt relieved, letting go of his sadness and embracing nature. Next, Hiraku finished building a resting place and returned to his work in the fields. While working, he thought about what he would plant after creating the field: potatoes, tomatoes, or cucumbers. But when he finished the field, he realized that without seeds, how could he grow food crops? Surprisingly, after waking up one morning, seedlings had sprouted on their own without seeds. Perhaps it was thanks to the power of his versatile farming tools that they were able to grow like that. Now, his task was to protect this food crop from the flood. Because of the wild animals, Hikaru continued using his all-purpose farming tools to create a wall of wood. He also dug a moat around it to prevent the animals from approaching. After finishing, he went into the forest to hunt rabbits for lunch. In the following days, food gradually grew, and he also completed a hut to live in. Because he didn't have enough strength to lift the wood, he had to dig a foundation inside to create more space. At this time, Hikaru was very happy to realize that his dream world was about to be completed. The next morning, as usual, Hikaru checked outside the fence and saw 2 large dogs. Seeing that one seemed injured, he let them inside and offered them some wild boar meat that he hadn't finished the day before. He then realized that the female dog wasn't injured at all, but was actually pregnant and about to give birth to her puppies. That night, he asked the hut to house the pair of stray dogs. He then returned to his hollow tree to sleep. The next morning, Hikaru went back to the hut to look for them. When he saw that the mother dog had safely given birth to 4 puppies, he was very happy and gave them all the best meat from the wild boar. From now on, Hiraku's farm had more members. The tomatoes were ready for harvest, and the dogs helped Hiraku hunt and guard the surroundings. At this point, the initial tasks to create a farm were completed. Although there were still many things Hiraku hadn't done, he would live a relaxed life and enjoy it. Back at God's place, he wanted to see if Hiraku was doing well. Because he had previously caused him a life full of injustice, he wanted to ensure that Hiraku was now living a happy new life. But mistake followed mistake. This time, he sent him down to a deadly forest full of monsters. He thought that this way, Farmer Hiraku would be eaten and soon return to his spirit form. He thought, I'll apologize again when he comes back, but he didn't. Little did they know that Hiraku was now very happy with his new life. The power of his all-purpose farming tool allowed him to plant any kind of crop he could think of, combined with his agricultural knowledge from his previous life to make them grow quickly. To thank the gods for giving him this life, he made a statue for them. At this moment, Hiraku thought that life was still very primitive because the food consisted only of rabbit meat and vegetables, so he decided to try planting fruit trees like apples or pears. While waiting for them to grow, he thought of something to do with his pets. Because they could sense things, Hiraku could freely go on reconnaissance missions without fear of getting lost. Finally, Hiraku found a water source, a large stream, but it was a 30-minute walk from the base. So he had to find a way to pipe the water back. After building a toilet so he could work there later, Hiraku returned with his pets on a wheelbarrow made from his all-purpose farming tool. But after rushing a short distance, he fell because there was no path through the forest. Upon returning to the base, Hiraku expanded the fields to plant more rice and rapeseed. Time passed, and winter arrived, making Hiraku feel cold. His only warm clothing was a smelly rabbit skin, so he had to light his own fire and stay holed up in his hut. Just then, a giant spider appeared at Hiraku's base. It could weave cloth, and in an instant, it created a handkerchief, much to his surprise. This spider loved potatoes, so it wove a warm coat for Hiraku from his grass skin. From then on, things like blankets and curtains were no longer a worry, as it had built a nest in a large tree at the base. He named it Zabuton. Sometime later, heavy snow fell. Although he had prepared plenty of food to cope with the winter, Hiraku still felt uneasy, a feeling of loneliness and coldness, as it had been a long time since he had been there. He hadn't interacted with humans before. Soon, winter passed and spring arrived. The dogs he named Kochi had changed a little. They had grown up and started looking for mates. Seeing them in pairs made Hiraku feel lonely. Even Jabon had many dogs, while Hiraku still didn't have a single friend. Just then, Zabuton rang the alarm, surprising Hiraku. Thinking some danger was approaching the base, Hiraku went into the forest to investigate. Upon arriving, he found a girl naked and entangled in spiderwebs. Hiraku didn't know why she was there or what she was doing that was scaring the animals, but when he heard her cry for help, he went and gave her his shirt. Suddenly, the girl bit Hiraku's neck. After getting some blood from him, she transformed into an adult with her own clothes. But as soon as she thanked Hiraku for helping her, she was attacked by the dogs. To restore her body to its original state, she had to beg Hiraku to ask the dogs to leave. At this point, he learned that their meeting was accidental and that she had no intention of harming him. Her blood drinking was to restore her strength and maintain her attire. Feeling that she had just been bullied by the dogs, Hiraku allowed her to drink blood again. Because this was a healthy body, she could drink freely without weakening him. Afterward, he took her to visit his base. When she saw the things Hiraku had planted, she was incredibly surprised and couldn't believe that such a beautiful place could exist in the middle of the forest. Moreover, it was filled with fruits she had never seen before. Seeing this, Hiraku cut her a tomato and she ate it with joy. Witnessing the girl's happy face relieved Hiraku of his loneliness. That night, Hiraku learned that her name was Rusu, and she was a vampire. Using magic, she had a whole research project on illusion potions, so a nobleman wanted to seize her research. When he learned that Rusi wanted to escape, he chased after her, forcing her to flee to this forest. Luckily, here she met Hiraku and found many foods she had never seen before. She wanted to stay here for a while to research these things, feeling this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hiraku made a proposal. He knelt down and begged her to stay with him forever. Hiraku had lived alone here for a long time, and now wanted someone to live with him for companionship. Hiraku's unexpected plea made Rusi blush. At first, she hesitated because she belonged to the vampire clan and was in danger, But when she realized Hiraku's sincerity, she accepted to stay with him. Seeing that Rusi had agreed, he was overjoyed and rushed to embrace her. Since Rusi came to live with him, life here has become much happier. But there is one thing she had to shrink herself to restrain Hiraku, in case he became violent. At this moment, Du wanted him to plant more herbs so she could study them later. She helped him with some tasks, such as using magic to illuminate the bathroom, helping Hiraku find salt nearby for his meals. After finishing their work, they rested and enjoyed a cup of herbal tea. Jufa found the tea very delicious, prompting Hiraku to consider planting more tea plants. Just then, they heard an alarm from Jibuton. When they ran out, they encountered a very familiar scene. A girl with angel wings entangled in spiderwebs, just like Du had been before. After being freed, she used magic to heal herself. Hiraku then realized she was there to abduct Du, but before she could do anything, she was dealt with by the dogs. He couldn't believe that both girls had arrived in the same situation. At this point, Du introduced Hiraku as her husband with an embarrassed expression. Hiraku was very surprised to hear this, as it was the first time Du had spoken like this. The girl introduced herself as Tia, a member of the angel tribe. When asked why she captured Du, Tia said that Du had caused trouble in the town. Du explained that it was a troublesome nobleman who had forced her to make medicine for him, so she complied. However, what she made was explosives, causing the nobleman to lose face. Therefore, he had put a large bounty on Du's head, so Tia tried to capture her. Feeling weaker than Tia, Du had to flee. After hearing this, she also felt equally weak, having just been attacked by a pack of dogs. At this point, Du told her to put everything aside and stay with her, because life here was very fun and she would surely like it. Then Du took her to visit the food fields that Hiraku had personally cultivated. But when they encountered Zabuton, she was so scared that she fainted on the spot because she was terrified of spiders. At this point, Du invited Tia to go harvest the crops with Hiraku. Seeing this, I couldn't believe that an angel like her would ever have to harvest cabbage. But after being guided by Hiraku, I did it easily. Hiraku then offered me some pickled cabbage to enjoy its fresh taste. And so, another hard day passed. They harvested everything they needed. I even tasted a strawberry, which had a sweet and sour, slightly bitter taste, and said that I really enjoyed farming. Seeing this, Du begged me to stay, because if I went alone, my body wouldn't be able to handle it. I didn't understand what was going on, but from that day on, I stayed with Du and Hiraku. The three of us lived together happily, enjoying the farming work, which was hard, but very interesting. After getting used to farming, I wanted Hiraku to plant more strawberries. Hiraku wanted that too, but because there weren't many people, it was difficult to harvest them all in time. Afterwards, the three of us went to the hut to visit the dogs and saw that they had grown up and had reproduced more, which made me very happy. Feeling frightened and finding the hut they were in rather cramped, Hiraku moved to a more spacious place. Just then, he saw Juton's children bidding him farewell and leaving with the wind. But some chose to stay with their mother, which reassured him. Tia also said she wanted to go outside, making Hiraku think she would leave him. However, she returned a short while later, bringing with her beautiful fairy girls, whose names all began with the character Lai. They asked to stay with Hiraku, and although they looked young, they had all lived for hundreds of years. Seeing his hesitation, Tia began to recount their sad story. They originally lived in the northern region, but 200 years ago, that place was destroyed by a human war. Since then, they had left their homeland and lived as nomads throughout the forest. Now, they wanted a place to settle and reproduce, so they wanted to live here with Hiraku. With both Du and Tia pleading, Hiraku agreed. The whole group then met their parents. Rab and the dogs scared everyone so much that they fainted on the spot. Due to the sudden increase in the number of people, Hiraku decided to build a new house because all 7 fairy girls wanted to live together. This would be a very large house, and thanks to the all-purpose farming tools, the surrounding trees were quickly cleared. Furthermore, the fairy girls all had meticulous and precise construction skills. In just 10 days, the house was completed, making everyone happy except Hiraku, who was a little sad to see it was several times bigger than his own hut. Upon entering, he saw that the house's hall had been extended to the 2nd floor, with all the necessary private rooms above. In the middle of the house was a large space for working and eating. The fairy girls had also adapted to farming life, so Hiraku no longer worried about the harvest. At this time, he had the opportunity to talk to Leah, and learned that fairies also ate meat and used fire, unlike what he had known before. He knew that fairies loved nature and hated using fire. Leah, after hearing this, said that if Hiraku, living like that in the forest, by now the grass must be green. Leah thought Hiraku was somewhat backward, so she wanted to help him with the metalworking. She thought only dwarves could do this job, but the girls did it better. They put charcoal and iron powder into the forge, heated it, and then forged the molten metal to create a very beautiful pan, which Hiraku praised profusely. Leah said that this job was too easy because they had lived nomadic lives for 200 years. Only reproduction was something they hadn't mastered yet. Hiraku, upon hearing this, was a little worried about his health, but he was very happy that they had come here with him. Later, Leah asked about the rice field next to them. She learned that Hiraku had finished harvesting and grinding the rice into flour. Seeing this, Lifu wanted some flour to make cakes. Hiraku happily agreed, and then the girls made cakes together. After a while, when the cakes came out of the oven, everyone looked at them and felt hungry. Then everyone enjoyed them very much because they couldn't resist. Resisting such delicious cakes, Hiraku immediately considered expanding the field, but he wondered whose territory this was. Du said that, considering the scope of influence, this place probably belonged to the Demon King. Hearing this, Hiraku couldn't help but feel frightened, realizing he had provoked the ultimate threat to this world. He wondered if establishing a base here would disturb the Demon King. Seeing this, Du took Hiraku's hand and said that since he had created this place, it was now his territory. That night, the three girls sat and chatted about Hiraku, all admiring him not only for taming a pack of hell wolves and a demon spider, but also for creating a thriving agricultural field. However, Hiraku didn't know much about this world and lived a carefree and peaceful life, because they knew that all Hiraku thought about was what to do for his base the next day. The next morning, Hiraku woke up to find a queen bee entangled in a spiderweb at Zabuton. Knowing that the bee was dangerous, Hiraku kept it at his base, and next to the orchard, he built a hut for the bees to build their nest. 10 days later, the beehive was finished, but Hiraku didn't know how he would harvest the honey. Ta thought the beehive looked interesting, but when she got close, she was too scared and flew away. A little later, Hiraku went to the reservoir he had built earlier, intending to channel water from the stream for daily life and agricultural development. However, Hiraku didn't know how to bring the water. Initially, he planned to use stones to make a channel, but found it difficult to find stones in the forest. If he used wood, the water would leak a lot. So, from the large pile of earth he had dug earlier to build the reservoir, Hiraku used his all-purpose farming tools to harden the soil like concrete, creating a channel. Then, together with the fairy girls, he built a channel to bring water from the stream to the reservoir. Thanks to the girls' construction skills, the channel was completed very quickly, and in no time at all, water from the stream flowed directly into the reservoir. At this time, Hiraku noticed that the flowing water also carried many strange fish, and they became everyone's lunch. Initially, Du and Tia were hesitant to eat them, because they were very aggressive fish, but when they saw Hiraku eating them normally, they tried them too. Once they tasted them, everyone praised how delicious they were, and the fairy girls also wanted to eat them, so everyone finished off the fish. After eating, Hiraku prepared his tools to plant rice. He had previously experimented with growing rice, and now that the water had been channeled to the reservoir, in an instant, Hiraku used his all-purpose farming tools to create 2 rice paddies and channeled the water into them. Seeing this, the girls thought he wanted to raise fish, but Hiraku was preparing rice seedlings for planting. He told everyone to come down and help him, then demonstrated some basic techniques to guide them. Although they weren't very skilled yet, after a while, the rice field was completed. Thanks to the all-purpose farming tool, the rice ripened in an instant. Then Hiraku and the girls harvested the rice and dried it to remove all the moisture. To get the rice grains, Hiraku created a threshing machine from the time of the Trung sisters. After using it to thresh the rice, he used a mortar and pestle to pound it. Finally, Hiraku held the rice grains he had made himself in his hands. Du and Tia seemed very eager to try it, but Hiraku said there was one more step: cooking. He asked Du to use fire magic to help him light the stove, and in a moment, the rice was cooked. Du was very eager to eat it, but Hiraku said there was still one last step. He molded the rice into rice balls and filled them with the fish and meat from the previous day. So, after all that effort, the girls enjoyed the fruits of their labor, and everyone praised how delicious it was, making Hiraku feel like this was the happiest moment for a farmer. But when Hiraku touched it, there was only 1 grain of rice left. Seeing how much they enjoyed the rice balls, he wanted to make another batch. The girls could easily clean themselves with magic, even with just a breath, but Hiraku couldn't, so he planned to build a large bathhouse. After drawing up the design for the girls to see, they immediately started working. The bathhouse was soon completed. The water for the bathtub could be taken from the stream, but Hiraku didn't know where to dispose of the used water. Seeing this, Tia suggested using slimes to clean the dirty water and waste. She then went and caught a group of slimes for Hiraku to test. He expected them to kill him like other adventurers, but these creatures were very gentle. They could clean the water and even purify the toilet. But there was something else. Only the bravest would dare to deal with their sorrow. Afterward, Hiraku went to gather firewood to boil water, only to discover that many mushrooms had grown. Fearing they might be poisonous, he tried to cultivate edible mushrooms. Because he was so engrossed in cultivating mushrooms, Hiraku didn't open the bathhouse until late evening. Since the girls were accustomed to a wild life, Hiraku had to guide them step by step to enter the bathhouse. First, they had to undress completely, then pour hot water over themselves and cleanse their bodies. Only then were they allowed to enjoy the intoxicating experience. Hearing this, the girls immediately followed suit and joined Hiraku in the bath, making him feel embarrassed. He considered building a separate bathhouse for himself, but they said bathing together like this was more fun and saved him the trouble of boiling water multiple times. The next morning, Hiraku checked the mushrooms again and found they had grown abundantly. He was about to make mushroom hot pot when he saw the dogs had brought 5 more fairy girls. Their names all began with the letter La, sharing a common kinship. When Hiraku learned that the 5 girls shared the same circumstances as Leah's group, he took them into his base. Seeing this, Leah's first suggestion was to build a house for the 5 girls, along with renovating Hiraku's own house as their numbers had increased. The girls were overjoyed, as they were about to restore their tribe and create more descendants, but Hiraku wasn't quite sure how. At this point, the dog Kusuo began to speak, revealing its past experiences. It had lived in the wild and had a mate. Knowing she was pregnant and about to give birth, it felt it lacked the confidence to lead a family like other animals. Therefore, it couldn't fight off a bear, resulting in both of them being severely injured. Afterward, it had to find its way back to the center of the forest to avoid the bears. Normally, those who hid deep in the forest, like the fairy girls, couldn't settle down permanently, but unexpectedly, it met someone there. Hiraku, with his all-purpose farming tools, thought he would put an end to their lives, but he saved both of them. Afterward, he offered them wild boar meat and cared for them so well that they didn't want to leave. Thus, both dogs and their offspring became Hiraku's pets. Seeing their master surrounded by so many girls, they couldn't help but admire him. But Hiraku didn't know that the dogs he was raising were actually hellwolves, creatures feared by the whole world. But that was okay, because deep down they were always grateful to their master. A few days later, their new house was completed. With investments in everything from the foundation to the pillars, it would be the most amazing house ever. Inside, Hiraku realized how spacious it was. The 3 girls then took him on a tour of all the rooms, from the dining room to the kitchen, then the basement for food storage, followed by Hiraku's private room, as well as each girl's room, and a special room. He used it to create offspring, which made him speechless. The house also had a view directly towards an ancient tree, making Hiraku feel as if it was protecting him. To make the house even more beautiful, Hiraku also made statues of dogs and placed them in front of the house. After that, he prepared lunch for everyone. Wanting to try a new dish, Hiraku decided to make kadi. When Du and Tia asked about the recipe, Hiraku said, "This dish is very simple. Just put something called Du in it, and you're done." The girl misunderstood, thinking he had such a bizarre hobby. Then the 3 of them went to the grain field to prepare the ingredients for kadi. First, the seeds of the fennel plant, the main ingredient that gives kadi its characteristic aroma. Next, turmeric, which gives kadi its yellow color. After cleaning the bottom part, Du and Tia used magic to dry it. Next, coriander seeds to make powder for kadi, and the green leaves are cilantro. Although Hiraku found the herbs very fragrant, when the dogs would run away at the smell of it, and upon discovering a plant that could repel hellhounds, Du immediately wanted to study it. Meanwhile, Hiraku continued to gather more pepper and chili, but when he turned around, he saw no one. It turned out the 2 girls had gone to study coriander, leaving only Hiraku and Leah to make the curry. With Hiraku's guidance, they quickly finished. While waiting for the meat to simmer, Hiraku noticed something was missing. It was naan bread, a type of bread-like pastry. Hiraku calculated the number of people and began preparing it. First, he rolled the flour flat, then brushed it onto the back of the pan. A few minutes later, the naan bread was cooked, and the pot of meat was almost tender. Du and Leah, upon smelling the curry, felt their stomachs rumble. Without keeping everyone waiting any longer, Hiraku and the girls immediately enjoyed the divine curry. Since no one had ever eaten this dish before, Hiraku showed them how to eat it with naan bread. The girls then tried it and praised it profusely. The more he ate, the tastier it became. so he finished the entire pot of stew in no time. However, the dogs couldn't eat it because it was quite spicy due to the chili and pepper. Hiraku also suffered the same fate. When he reached the pot, there was nothing left. But seeing everyone's happy faces made him very satisfied. That winter was approaching, so Hiraku had to prepare firewood in advance for storage. Jabon was about to hibernate, so he had made him some mats beforehand. Du and Tia were preserving meat by marinating it and smoking it. Hiraku was trying to preserve vegetables to have enough food for the winter. He put all the vegetables into containers and covered them with cloth. When the snow fell, the cold air would keep the vegetables fresh. After that, he turned to Du and saw that she could use magic easily, so Hiraku tried to imitate her, but nothing happened. That night, Hiraku asked Du and learned that without proper magic training, one couldn't perform it. At this point, Hiraku realized how incompetent he was. Although he only knew how to do chores and cook, Du immediately said that he was the best here because only he could settle in a place like this, something no one had ever done before. Finally, winter arrived. Hiraku went around checking and found everything was fine. Since it was a time to spend more time indoors, he created all sorts of games, like checkers, chess, and more. After being taught how to play checkers by Hiraku, Du and Tia challenged each other to a duel. Because they had many grudges from the past, they would use this game to settle things. In the first game, Du was overwhelmed by Tia. Seeing this, she broke the game by pretending to slip and knocking over the chessboard. Thinking they would get another chance, Tia easily used magic to make the board return to its original position. Leaving Du's side, Hiraku went to the table of the two fairy girls. This match seemed equally tense when he saw that Kuo could give Leah pointers, which surprised Hiraku greatly. He couldn't believe that these beasts, the dogs, could understand the rules and play together like humans. At this point, Hiraku intended to challenge them, but upon realizing the terrifying energy, he gave up. Du, after losing to Ta, turned to challenge Kuo to find victory, thinking it would be easy since it was a dog, but in the end, she suffered the same fate. Next, the whole group played mahjong. To get revenge for Du, Hiraku was determined to win, but he ended up in B, while Kuo won, thus joining the losers club. Saying goodbye to intellectual games, the next game was bowling. Because Du didn't understand why she had to knock over the pins, Hiraku drew pictures of bad guys on them, so she could throw the ball to finish them off. Perhaps because this game was simple and highly entertaining, it was very popular with the girls. Remembering the games Hiraku brought, winter quickly passed. The snow melted, and spring arrived in his kingdom. On his first day back at work, Hiraku wanted to finish his planting work, but you were surprised to hear it ring an alarm. Everyone ran out to see, and discovered a huge dragon flying straight towards the base. They said it was a govan, and they didn't know how it had gotten there. Hiraku was about to do something to drive it away, when the govan let out a loud roar, gathered energy, and launched itself straight towards the base. At the same time, Du and Tia used their magic to defend themselves, but the attack caused fire to spread around, so the fairy girls had to quickly put out the fire. Seeing that it could destroy their base, Hiraku had to take it down right there. At that moment, the power of the all-purpose farming tool transformed into a spear in Hiraku's hand. He picked it up and threw it straight at the Gevan. It used its strength to block it, but Hiraku's spear was stronger, injuring the Gevan in one wing. After the spear returned, he threw it again, sending the Gevan to its demise. Witnessing Hiraku's power, the fairy girls were astonished. The girls were extremely surprised and frightened. Everyone then went to where Wen had fallen to check on her. Looking at Wen's body, Hiraku wondered if someone had sent her here to attack the base. He replied that it was probably just a wild animal that happened to be there by chance. Seeing this, he felt relieved and took Wen back to make dinner for everyone. The girls were very excited to see Hiraku preparing the meat, as it was the first time they had eaten Wen's meat, since anyone who approached them to hunt them was burned to ashes. Hiraku then arranged various dishes made from the familiar meat on the table. Everyone ate and praised the delicious food with great joy. At this time, Du and Tia mentioned the spear from earlier that afternoon, their faces still showing fear. Both thought that if they had eaten that spear, they wouldn't be sitting here now. Luckily, they only encountered dogs, and not Hiraku like earlier that afternoon. Meanwhile, at the Demon King's fortress, the 3 members of the 4 heavenly kings were extremely worried when they learned Griven was defeated with just 2 attacks. They didn't know who their opponent was, or how they could possess such terrifying power. Overwhelmed with fear, some resigned immediately. On the gatekeeper's side, Doram asked his subordinate, Gucci, what would happen if he were to eat that poisonous plant? Gucci replied that anyone hit by it would end up like Griven, so it was best not to make enemies with Hiraku anymore. At this moment, Hiraku remembered the familiar meat from yesterday. Although delicious, something was missing. Looking at the vineyard, Hiraku realized it was wine. He believed wine existed in this world because he saw everyone diligently harvesting. Now, all that was needed was to crush and ferment it to produce wine. So he asked the girls to enthusiastically trample on the grapes. Hiraku, meanwhile, would use buckets to catch the spilled liquid, as these buckets were carefully made to prevent leaks. Initially, the girls were unfamiliar with this. None of them had ever trampled on food before. Seeing this, Hiraku reminded them to follow him around. Be careful not to trip each other. But as soon as they finished speaking, Leah and Tia fell. At this point, Tia thought that to keep everyone moving in sync, they needed a way to signal each other, so they came up with the idea of singing while walking, making their steps even more synchronized. Du and Hiraku were then pulled up to join the group. Soon, 16 barrels of wine were finished, just waiting to ferment. Although it was a bit much, if they drank it every day, it would be gone quickly. Although Hiraku's life was very happy, God was still being reprimanded by his daughter, the goddess of agriculture. Before, he threw him into the deadly forest, and now he gave him the holy spear Greem. Anyone who held it would eventually have their life force drained. Seeing this, he said Hiraku would be fine because he had a healthy body, but his daughter still didn't forgive him. When she saw Hiraku sculpting a statue of her as an old man, he was punished by his daughter. He was made to kneel there for 300 years to atone for his sins. Meanwhile, at Hiraku's place, an alarm sounded. When he arrived, he was met with a familiar scene from years ago, a girl trapped in a web. This time it was Flora, Du's cousin. She said that she knew her sister was being chased by a dark angel, so she followed her here, unaware that the angel had been behind her all along. Flora was so frightened that she had to call her cousin for help. At this moment, Flora looked at her cousin's husband and observed that Hiraku seemed weak, but upon hearing that he had subdued the Hell Wolves and defeated Ween, Flora apologized for her rudeness. Only then did Hiraku realize that the dogs he had raised all this time were actually Hell Wolves. To apologize for scaring Flora earlier, Hiraku prepared some food for her, which she enjoyed immensely. Hiraku said that among the food was fermented tofu, which he had spent a lot of time experimenting with. Flora didn't know what fermentation was, so Hiraku explained that it was microorganisms that could ferment certain foods. Flora found this knowledge very interesting, so she saved it for later research. She then said goodbye to the Hiraku group and left, but she returned after only a month, bringing with her a team of maids and 2 lactating cows. Hiraku was delighted because they could produce butter and milk. At this point, the head maid introduced herself as Anne, and Hiraku said she could use them as she pleased. At this point, Flora began to worry, fearing she was at a disadvantage. In the base, there were many individuals from the demon, dragon, fairy, and other beast races, but she, a member of the angel race, was alone. After thinking for a while, she asked Hiraku for permission to leave for a while. When she returned, she brought her own subordinates, along with a few lizard men and a chicken capable of laying eggs. The arrival of many different races rapidly increased the civilization of the base. The demon maids were assigned household chores by Hiraku, though they were quite simple at cooking. Since they were grilling, Hiraku instructed them on the cooking methods he knew, while the angelic girls were sent to guard the area in case Wen reappeared near the base. The strong lizard men were assigned to handle manual labor. At this point, Hiraku realized that the number of villagers had increased rapidly. Moreover, Leah had brought back many more fairy girls, and since no fairy sons had survived, the responsibility of maintaining their lineage fell heavily on the shoulders of the farmer Hiraku. The next morning, Hiraku summoned representatives from the tribes to discuss the matter. Since it was originally just a small hut, but had now become a large village, Hiraku wanted everyone to name the village. Du suggested using Hiraku's name, but that didn't sound very reasonable. Anne wanted to name it after the forest, which was called the Forest of Death. Suddenly, Buto told him to open the door, and outside was a giant tree. Seeing this, Hiraku immediately named it. The village was always called Great Tree Village, because it was the place where the village originated. That night, they held a party to celebrate the village's naming, and to celebrate, the first batch of sake the village had made was a must. Everyone then called Hiraku village chief, which made him a little hesitant, but Du said that only he was suitable for the position. Hiraku happily announced that the party had officially begun, and everyone celebrated to the fullest to congratulate the village and Hiraku. Although everyone called him village chief, Hiraku's work remained unchanged. Before, the village only had farming, but now it also included livestock farming. At this time, Hiraku was informed by a guardian angel that a messenger from the demon kingdom had arrived. He went to greet him and learned that it was the 4 heavenly kings. When Hiraku introduced himself as village chief, Bill gave him a gift to show his friendship. Then Bill conveyed a message from the demon king to Hiraku, saying that he wanted to speak with Hiraku about. Hiraku recalled that Du had previously said this land was connected to the Demon King, so he was very worried. He feared that the Demon King would force him to pay a harvest tax or drive him away. So he offered to pay 10p in tax to be allowed to farm there. Bill was surprised by Hiraku's decision and immediately agreed. They then signed a contract. The tax would be 10p per crop, and the deadline for payment was before winter each year. After signing the contract, Hiraku even gave Bill a gift to take home. Seeing that Hiraku was still a little worried, Du said that because he had paid the tax, he would be protected by the Demon King. Bill told him that the actual tax here was around 50 to 60 piastres, but Hiraku managed to reduce it to just 10 piastres. He even got the Demon King's gift, a panacea, truly worthy of his reputation as the village's diplomatic war god. Meanwhile, the 4 heavenly kings were all surprised to learn that Hiraku had submitted to them. They wondered what shady schemes he might be plotting, given that Hiraku's power had already destroyed Ween. He also possessed powerful allies like the Vampire Princess and the Angel of Destruction within the village, a legion of hellhounds, and fairy girls outside, along with assassin angels guarding the village. Furthermore, Hiraku wanted to join the Demon King's army, something Bill couldn't refuse, as a refusal could easily flatten the Demon King's fortress. Even before leaving, Bill received a gift from Hiraku, which he thought was something dangerous, but inside were 6 apples. Bill then realized the wrapping cloth was woven by a demon. The Demon Lord's power was equal to that of the previous Demon King, the Serpent King. Hearing this, the people were terrified and demanded the same thing again. The next morning, a character visited Hiraku. This time, it was the dragon god Dorem and his subordinates. They also brought some gifts to exchange with Hiraku. Among them was a very precious sword, a Gucci. They introduced themselves, saying they lived in the south of this land, and being neighbors, they wanted to greet Hiraku. Hiraku thanked them for their thoughtfulness. But noticing Dorem still bowing his head, he gently reminded him to look up, and only then did Hiraku see how huge he was. He invited Dorem inside, and Dorem transformed back into his human form. Still frightened by Hiraku's power, his introduction wasn't very natural, but once inside and drinking sake with Hiraku, he became very happy. He said he wanted to stay there for the rest of his life and never return. Seeing this, Hiraku said he had many things to attend to at home and had to go back to deal with them. He couldn't stay here to bother Hiraku either. After Dorem returned, Hiraku began thinking about how to properly welcome guests, as many people would surely come to visit the village later. After several days, Hiraku decided to build a house to accommodate guests. Seeing that a large number of guests would arrive, everyone suggested building a large house. The first floor would be used for receiving guests, and the upper floor would be for those who wanted to stay overnight. So the fairy girls started building the guest house, while Hiraku considered how to welcome guests in a friendly manner. The angel girls were suspicious of guests, and the godlike men were always brandishing weapons. Guests would be scared away before they even arrived. Therefore, everyone made a bell for Zabuton specifically to announce the arrival of guests, and Hiraku, along with Du and Tia, would go to the gate to greet them. Upon hearing this, Anne and Zaga immediately objected to his decision. They were afraid. It was thought that some villains disguised as guests would visit the village, so the welcoming team had a few more members. Knowing that Flora also wanted to stay, Hiraku assigned her the task of guarding at night, as vampires can stay awake for many nights without getting tired. After everything was prepared, Hiraku had the opportunity to welcome the next guests, the beastmen from the mountains to the east of the village. Sensing something suspicious about them, she questioned them extensively. The Hellwolves were equally vigilant. Only after confirming they weren't enemies did she invite them inside. At the guest house, they were greeted by beautiful maidens, but when it came time to prepare a feast, the 3 girls locked them inside. When Hiraku questioned them, the 3 explained that traditionally, those who showed their respect always brought gifts when visiting, and these people hadn't brought any, so they couldn't be treated normally. Furthermore, they had left 2 people behind to ambush them, which had diminished their prestige. They were only served simple meals here. Hiraku felt they were somewhat unfortunate, so he gave them some more sake, but he only allowed 2 cups per person. At this point, Hiraku went to inquire about their lives. Goff, the representative of the Beastmen group, told Hiraku that their village mainly lived off hunting and mining. They had many trade transactions with humans on the other side of the mountain, but because trade was very difficult, they had to find new business partners. While searching, they discovered Hiraku's Great Tree Village. Feeling uneasy, Hiraku asked about the 2 people ambushing them from behind. Goff said that it was their first time here, and they were afraid something might happen, and someone had run back to report. Seeing that Goff's group was friendly, Hiraku became more open with him. At this point, Goff wanted to trade and exchange goods with Hiraku. Since they had no currency, they could only exchange products. The two villages were also very far apart, so they needed something to transport goods. It was Hiraku who came up with the idea of using wolves to transport goods. When Hiraku asked what items they wanted to trade, Goof told him they wanted food from Hiraku's village, and in return, they would bring him glass and metal goods, which were also things Hiraku needed. He immediately agreed, as the trade between the two sides was established, making the Beastmen group overjoyed, because their village was very poor, and this was their first major business deal. Soon after, Hiraku set off to attend the market in Hing village. T also went there on Hiraku's behalf. Because the market was very far from Hing village, they had to ask Dorim for help. In return, Dorim would take a barrel of sake from him. It seemed he hadn't forgotten its taste after his previous visits. Thanks to Dorim's help, the trade went very smoothly. A few days later, T returned and reported to Hiraku. The Beastmen were very happy to enjoy the agricultural products he had brought. Dorim seemed sad because he had sold Hiraku's precious barrel of sake, so he invited him to stay the night to eat and drink to his heart's content. At this time, Ta told Hiraku that 20 people from Lin village wanted to migrate there, and of course, they were all beautiful young girls. Hearing this, Hiraku requested 2 more young men, as there were already many girls there. The next day, the Beast girls arrived at Hiraku's place. Among them was a girl named Sena, accompanied by 3 young men, exactly as he had requested. However, these young men were too young for the regulations, but Hiraku thought that in 10 years, they would become the future of the village. By then, they would share the great responsibilities of a man with him. The girls were still afraid they would be treated badly when they came to live there, but Hiraku reassured them not to worry and had his servants prepare rooms for them. He added that they would all faint when they encountered wolves and spiders. The girls could also use magic. It was easy, just like everyone else. At this moment, Hiraku saw that from the lizard tribe to the livestock, everyone could perform magic very simply. Even Slim could breathe fire, making Hiraku feel inferior. But he thought he should just focus on farming instead of trying to learn magic. Suddenly, a very strong vibration occurred nearby. A guardian angel came to inform Hiraku that there was a fight in the north of the forest. It was a battle between a bear and a giant snake. The girls seemed very worried, fearing the battle would affect the village, but Hiraku was thinking about whether bear and snake meat were edible. The girl then led Hiraku to where the 2 giant animals were. Upon seeing them, she was about to call for reinforcements, fearing they were too strong, but Hiraku asked her to lower the altitude a little. He held the weapon in his hand, and with a single slash, both animals fell to the ground. The angel girls were amazed, because surely only Hiraku could send them to their demise with just one move like that. At this moment, Anne asked how he would prepare the bear meat, and Hiraku put the meat into a pot, added sake, and stirred it well. In just a few minutes, the braised bear meat was ready. However, because he lacked experience in this dish, the meat still had a fishy taste. Luckily, the crispy fried snake meat was incredibly delicious, its flavor very similar to chicken. Hiraku wanted some extra seasoning to go with it, so he went to Flora's research lab and asked her about a type of insecticide to kill microorganisms to prevent illness and stomach aches. After getting the medicine from Flora, Hiraku took the opportunity to ask about the miso soup incident from before. She said she had tried it, but failed repeatedly, and had to rebuild the shed 3 times. Hiraku encouraged her to keep trying. Then he went to the chicken coop and picked up a few eggs. Hiraku cracked all the eggs into a bowl, then added salt, vinegar, and oil, stirred it for a while, and finally created the mayo sauce. Thus, the crispy fried chicken was completed, and Flora praised it profusely. After that, after eating, he instructed Flora on how to make miso by boiling soybeans, soaking them in water, then grinding them, and adding shiitake mushrooms and salt. He then rolled them into balls and pressed them tightly into barrels. Finally, he stored them in the basement to ferment naturally. Although it would take several months to complete, patience was key to achieving a delicious taste. At that moment, Du went to inform Hiraku that he had guests waiting. Upon arriving, he met 3 members of the dwarf tribe, represented by Donoban. Donoban had heard that Hiraku's sake was delicious and wanted a sample. Hiraku readily agreed, but the girls flatly refused, saying that such precious sake wasn't easily given away. Donoban explained that although they lacked money, they possessed exceptional sake-making skills. They had overcome many dangers to come here solely to make sake, as the village had abundant agricultural produce and was sure to produce delicious sake. The girls' eyes widened with joy, and from that day on, the 3 of them began their work. The winemaking process was always top-notch. They made Shanghao corn wine. Hiraku tasted it and found it a bit strong, but the taste was undeniable. Incidentally, with the new wine, Hiraku held a party to welcome the beastmen and dwarves. Everyone then ate and drank together, having a great time. Dorem got drunk as usual, while Hiraku sat and chatted with Donoban. Donoban thanked Hiraku for accepting him as a winemaker. Seeing that Donoban was the first adult male to arrive, Hiraku asked if he liked any of the girls there. Donoban said that all the girls were beautiful, but his taste was for married women, so he wasn't interested in anyone. Hiraku thought to himself, it's true that cultural differences lead to such a preference for men. The next morning, Hiraku woke up to find a dragon approaching the village. Seeing that it was not only very friendly, he created a spear to defend himself. Just then, Dorem appeared to stop the dragon. Just then, Hiraku thought they were having an internal conflict, when a third dragon rushed forward. To help Dorem, Hiraku attacked the dragon that had just charged at him. The dragon dodged, and Hiraku prepared for his next attack. At that moment, Gucci stopped Hiraku and said they weren't enemies. It turned out that the two people who had ganged up on Dorem were his wife and daughter. They began to explain that because Dorem often left home at night acting suspiciously, his wife suspected he was sneaking off to the bay. Moreover, he wouldn't return until morning, and the treasures in the house would disappear without a trace. Dorem explained that it was all for his diplomatic work with the village, but his daughter still thought he was hiding something from them. Only when he shouted that he wasn't having an affair did they forgive him. Seeing this, Hiraku apologized profusely for attacking them. But because the fault lay with his family, Dorem reminded his wife and daughter to apologize as well. Seeing that all misunderstandings had been resolved, Hiraku bid them farewell. At this moment, the lady recalled the spear and the terrifying power Hiraku had wielded earlier. If it weren't for her old friend Zabutan's help, she wouldn't be standing here anymore. So, the lady entrusted her daughter, Rasti, with a very important task: to stay in the village and do her best to prevent Hiraku from becoming an enemy of the Dragon Clan. Faced with such a terrifying face, Rasti dared not refuse, and from that day on, Rasti became a new member of the village. Because Dorem had asked for her help, Hiraku also wanted to give Rasti something, but the Dragon Clan's power was too great, causing everything to spiral out of control. Sometimes, just a sneeze from Rasti would create a huge explosion, scaring the wolves away and causing cows and chickens to stop producing milk and laying eggs. At this point, Ta revealed to Hiraku that the Dragon Clan not only possessed overwhelming power, but were also very intelligent. Rusty was appointed as the village's diplomatic war god, and his first victim was the 4 heavenly kings. Bill was talking to a dragon, which frightened him. Seeing that Rusty seemed to be doing a good job of diplomacy, Hiraku was very pleased. The 4 heavenly kings couldn't believe that the village now had a dragon, so they planned to plant a butterfly snake to monitor the village. Therefore, the next morning, Bill called his daughter Flo to give her an important task. He wanted his daughter to investigate the village's military strength. Because she was very confident in her magic, Flo readily agreed. After observing the village for a while, she went to greet her. Knowing that Flo would be living there, Rusty greeted her, which frightened Flo a little. She couldn't believe that a legendary dragon was now introducing agricultural products to her. After walking together for a while, Rusty had to attend to his work, so Flo took the opportunity to investigate the surrounding area, which contained various races, such as beastmen, dwarves, and others. The vampire clan of the Angel tribe, consisting of Tia and the 3 angel assassins, went on a patrol and discovered there were also fairies present. With such a powerful force, how could the Demon King's army possibly cope? Moreover, the pets here included a whole pack of hell wolves and demons, but as far as she knew, these were just subordinates. She wondered how terrifying the final boss of the village truly was. Just then, Hiraku passed by and greeted Flame. Seeing that Hiraku was just an ordinary person, Flame ignored him and went home. But upon returning to the village, she learned that the person she had just met was the village chief, making her very frightened because she had been disrespectful to Hiraku. He also learned that she was Bill's daughter and was happy that she could be close to Rusty, but he found it a little strange that Flo was always afraid whenever she saw him. The next story was about the slimes. Tia brought them back, and they had multiplied into various colors. They looked harmless, but then one of them could drink alcohol. But then it drank an entire barrel of wine, which annoyed the girls greatly. To punish it, they held a trial and imposed various punishments on Slim, such as burning it alive or drying it out to death. However, Flo stopped them, saying that Slim had repented, and so Slim was acquitted. From then on, it would appear at every party and join everyone. Hiraku found it amusing, but having so many of them around certainly wasn't fun. The sky was beginning to turn autumnal, and the weather was gradually becoming cooler, making Hiraku crave hot pot. So, Hiraku and the girls made a hot pot meal to warm themselves up, but a hot pot without seafood was a real shame. Everyone was confused, not understanding what seafood Hiraku was talking about, as they had never seen the sea before, and could only imagine giant creatures. At this point, Flo said that there was a bustling seafood market to the south of the forest. Upon hearing this, Rusty immediately wanted to fly there. Flo immediately contacted a familiar merchant. It's true that when it comes to food, all the girls are enthusiastic. So the girls set off, and 3 days later, they brought back a merchant named Mike. He brought various seafood products that I trade there. When I heard Hiraku mention the seaweed, he promised to collect and deliver them to him. Incidentally, he came here today with 3 purposes. Firstly, to deliver seafood to Hiraku. Secondly, to propose a long-term cooperation. And thirdly, he wanted to become an authorized merchant here, meaning he would handle all agricultural product transactions here with the outside world. Because the agricultural products Hiraku owns are very attractive, he promised to sell them at a high price. Seeing Hiraku still a little skeptical, he gave him a list of the goods he was handling so that he could consider and agree to his cooperation proposal. Before leaving, he expressed his wish to try Hiraku's sake another time, but Rust refused because sake alone couldn't be used for trading. After that, after sending the merchants back, Hiraku then remarked that Michael was indeed a highly skilled businessman. He hoped the agricultural products would sell at a good price and that this partnership would be long-lasting. Michael, while very happy to have connected with Hiraku, was inwardly terrified. 3 days earlier, Michael had been informed that a group of customers from afar had come to see him. They brought some agricultural products to discuss trade. He thought it was just a small transaction and intended to send them away, but his merchant's intuition told him it was a valuable deal, so he invited them in, only to find out it was Flo, the daughter of one of the 4 heavenly kings. If he had sent her away, he would surely have lost his head. Moreover, Flo was accompanied by Rusty, the princess of the Dragon Clan. He felt this business deal was risky, but he couldn't ignore them. In his entire life as a merchant, he had never been involved in a transaction like this, especially now that his life hung by a thread. But after examining the agricultural products, indeed, these were valuable items. One fruit could fetch several silver coins. The opportunity had arrived, and nothing could stop him, so he immediately agreed to the deal with the 2 girls. Michael then sent people to gather the highest quality seafood at the harbor. Along with that, he prepared for a trip to meet his business partners right away. He thought he was about to go to the capital, but the place he went to for the transaction was a deadly forest. Before arriving, he even had the chance to meet Rusty's Dragon Clan. At Hiraku's village, he met all the important figures. On his way back, he was even threatened by Rusty. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief that the transaction was successful, but his limbs were completely numb. Hiraku and the girls were overjoyed. Finally, they got to enjoy a divine seafood hot pot. The next morning, Hiraku woke up to find a dragon taunting him. It had even defeated 3 angels, making Hiraku wonder if it wanted to fight him or something. Moreover, it was destroying everything around it with a very suggestive attitude. Then, Hiraku created a spear, and with a single throw, the dragon fell to the ground. Upon arriving, he discovered the dragon was a beautiful girl who didn't seem to be looking for trouble, so Hiraku asked why she had done that. The girl was thinking of a convincing answer when Dorem appeared. After Dorem explained, Hiraku understood. This girl's name was Hakuren, and she was his older sister. Because Dorem had married Rusty off, she had come to see what kind of man Rusty's husband was. When she learned that Hiraku was very strong, she only wanted to play a little, but Dorem said that wasn't right. What was the real reason? Actually, Hakuren was with her niece, who had married before her, which is why she came here. Hiraku found that reason somewhat acceptable, but the vandalism was unforgivable. So, Hakuren had to fix the consequences of her actions. That night, Hakuren enthusiastically joined the party with everyone. Seeing her aunt acting so naturally, like she was at home, Rusty had to apologize to Hiraku. After a hearty meal, Hakuren invited Hiraku to play mahjong. Still bitter about what happened that morning, she wanted something to bet on to get revenge. Hiraku couldn't think of anything to bet on, so he said whoever lost would have to strip naked. Everyone found this punishment very interesting and wanted to play. At this point, Hiraku realized he had made a mistake, so a tense mahjong battle ensued. The surrounding audience was very worried for Hiraku because he had lost repeatedly, leaving him with only a pair of shorts on, while those who should have been there were still alive. Even after stripping naked, he still hadn't lost a single battle. Hiraku wondered if they had cheated using their strength, but in reality, the Dragon Clan were all very intelligent, which is why Hiraku couldn't defeat them. Thus, the final battle ended in Hiraku's complete defeat. At this moment, The happiest were Hakuren and the girls, who had witnessed Hiraku's secret weapon. Meanwhile, at the Demon King's fortress, the four heavenly kings were even more worried upon learning that the village had recruited another Dragon Clan member. Bill asked the Demon King if he had any suggestions for that village, but what concerned him most was his daughter, who had reached adulthood and had been ignoring him lately. He turned back to the village, where Hakuren had become a teacher. Moreover, she was very skillful and could complete any task assigned to her. However, she suffered from laziness and was very fussy, so the best she could do at the moment was teach the Beast Clan. The next morning, 3 girls from the Snake Clan came to ask for her hand in school. Hiraku spared their lives because his pets had conquered the dungeon where they lived, terrifying them so much that they brought treasures to him for protection. Seeing that his pets had caused trouble for the 3 girls, Hiraku exchanged his crops for precious minerals from them. He also reminded them to wear more clothes next time they came to his place to avoid embarrassment. To thank Hiraku, from that day on, they helped him transport goods with his partners. Meanwhile, at the Demon King's fortress, his daughter Yuri was furious when she heard from her servant that Flem was being held hostage in the Great Tree Village. She decided to attack the village to reclaim Flem from Hiraku. Flem, busy with the village's accounts, had her father use magic to get there and inform her that Princess Yuri, the Demon King's daughter, was preparing to wage war against the village. While Flem was away, his subordinates had tipped off Yuri about this idea. Flem, upon hearing it, I don't understand what those 3 noble girls ate to dare to play such a big game. Especially since she always reports back home that there are so many powerful characters here, and if they act recklessly, the entire Demon King's castle will be flattened immediately. Bill said he had already explained it to the Demon King, but he's very indulgent towards his daughter Flem. Seeing this, Flem wanted to go and persuade the Demon King instead of her father, but Bill stopped her, fearing that if she did, the Demon King would think Flem was plotting rebellion. Bill also told Flem that the attack would take place tomorrow with only about 300 soldiers, and that the villagers could teach them a lesson. So, the next morning, the attack, a battle of wits and strength, took place. The outcome is probably predictable. Later, the 3 noble girls arrived to introduce themselves to Hiraku. Seeing him curious about who these 3 were, Flem replied that they were from the Demon Kingdom and were ready to atone for their sins to work here. If they dared to do what they did earlier, they would be dealt with ruthlessly by Flem. As soon as he heard this, all 3 girls were terrified, their faces turning purple. Flo introduced Yuri, saying she and Yuri were best friends. Seeing Yuri trembling, she reminded Hiraku to treat Yuri as if she were invisible. Hiraku then went to work in the fields and asked Flo to show the girls around the village. At this point, Flo turned back to the leopards, reminding them that it was best to work hard here and not reveal their identities. Yuri shouldn't be treated specially either. They should call each other by their names. Flo then led everyone on a tour of the village, from the grapes for winemaking to the newly planted rice, then to the water wheel and the ripe apples. Seeing all the interesting things in the village, the 3 leopards still hadn't given up their intention to invade, but Flo overheard their words, forcing them to change allegiance. Later, the 4 entered the guest house and met the diplomatic warrior Rusty. At this point, the 3 leopards thought that nobles like themselves couldn't possibly stay in such a rural place. And so that night, all 3 escaped, but outside, they encountered a pack of hell wolves, causing them to faint on the spot. The next morning, they woke up to find Jabutoshi's cubs, and they fainted again. By this time, all 3 had obediently stayed put, not daring to act recklessly anymore. From that day on, they became office staff supporting Flo. Princess Yuri was still being taken on a tour of the village by Flo. After playing with the hell wolves for a while, Yuri confided that she couldn't believe there was such a wonderful village outside the Demon Kingdom. She blamed herself for her lack of knowledge, which led her to consider attacking the place. Initially, Yuri thought the information Flo sent was false, but when she saw the Dragon Clan there, she believed it was true. Yuri then explained that she had come here because Flo had abandoned her. Hearing that her best friend had been taken hostage made Yuri uneasy. Understanding Yuri's feelings, Flo apologized for causing Yuri worry. The 2 then returned to. Everyone enjoyed dinner together, as it was their first time trying the food here, so the 3 office girls were very happy. At this time, Hiraku noticed Yuri. All day today she had been in her adult form, and she didn't understand why she couldn't transform back. The next morning, Yuri intended to help with the farming work, but her subordinates stopped her, thinking that farming was only for the lowly. Seeing the 3 leopards dare to insult farming, Flo immediately threatened to purge them all. After that, Yuri's group helped with the farming work with the Beast Kids. After finishing the work, they had lunch and rested with everyone. The next day, Yuri said goodbye to the village and left. She also thanked Hiraku for giving her so many wonderful experiences. The kids were very sad to see her leave, but she promised to return to visit them. Sina also gave Yuri gifts of cakes, made from the rice that everyone had harvested together. Turning to her 3 subordinates, they said they wanted to stay because the food here was too delicious, and there was still a lot of office work left after her daughter left. Upon returning, the Demon King sensed something was amiss. The reason was that Yuri was diligently working every day, no longer paying attention to him. Bill explained that the princess had now become an adult, capable of handling national affairs. However, upon hearing the word adult, the Demon King thought his daughter had been tricked by someone, and he immediately became enraged, demanding to kill that person right away. Note: it's best not to overthink things and maintain the dignity of a Demon King. After Yuri returned, the village began its pre-winter harvest. Seeing the mountain of food piled up, Hiraku was overjoyed, but also slightly worried, because there was too much. If they didn't use it all, it would be wasteful. Seeing this, Rusty and Hakuren asked for some food to share with their extended family. The next day, Rusty took some home to her parents and gave the rest to a demon merchant. Incidentally, the merchant asked Rusty to eliminate a sea monster that kept attacking his ship, and as a thank you, he gave her some sea meat. The monsters were brought back as gifts. When Hakuren returned, he brought with him a few people who wanted to immigrate. They were mountain elves, and their representative was named Iya. Because their place was very short of food, Hakuren brought them here. So Hiraku accepted them into the village and prepared to build houses for them. Because they were still used to life in the mountains, their work wasn't going smoothly. When Iya saw Hiraku working and wanted to do something, she asked him. He said he was making pottery, but the clay here wasn't suitable for firing. Iya then asked Hiraku to give her the job because her tribe lived in the mountains and knew many places with clay. A few days later, Iya brought back clay, and Hiraku's pottery making was successful. On the way, Iya also discovered a dungeon to the north. Because it was different from the leaf tribes, Iya asked Hiraku for permission to scout the area. He readily agreed and reminded everyone to be very careful and not to be reckless. As soon as Iya's group left, the men's bathhouse was completed. While Hiraku was enjoying himself, outside, trouble arose, and Flen caught 3 office girls attempting to break into the village. They claimed they wanted to befriend the village chief and intended to give him a back massage, but were caught by Flen before they could do anything, ruining their plan. The next morning, the scouting group returned to the village. They said there was a giant snake inside the dungeon, and they needed to eliminate it immediately, as the future of the fairy clan depended on its meat. Seeing Hiraku's questioning look, Iya explained that the snake's meat not only strengthened the kidneys and enhanced male potency, but also boosted vitality, benefiting married life and facilitating conception. This was the reason the fairy girls were so determined, scaring Hiraku, who quickly changed the subject. The weather had changed from autumn to winter, and seeing Du unwell, Hiraku became worried. Du said she only had a slight fever and felt a little nauseous. When Sena asked if she craved anything sour, Du said she wanted to eat some and felt a little nauseated. This symptom was very similar to someone in their village who had been pregnant before. Sena immediately said that Du must be pregnant. From that day on, life in the village became much happier. Hiraku's workday also began when the sun rose high. Because Du was pregnant, Hiraku was very concerned about her. He recalled that a few days before, when they heard the news of Du's pregnancy, everyone was surprised except for Du, who didn't seem surprised at all. However, because of this, Du couldn't transform temporarily, but she still advised Hiraku not to worry because everything would be all right. After that, Du went to the herb garden, while Hiraku went to the maids to oversee the housework, because lately, they all wanted to wake up before Hiraku, which worried him a little. He didn't want them to have to work hard, so he woke up. When the sun was high, Anne told Hiraku that because she wasn't careful, Slim had gone into the warehouse the day before and eaten an entire barrel of wine. Because of this, she felt very ashamed and had to work harder. A little later, everyone they had breakfast together, but because the dining hall was now crowded, they had to split into 3 groups. At this moment, Hiraku turned to Flora and saw her muttering something. It turned out that she hadn't slept yet because she was busy researching sub-miso yesterday. After Hiraku's group finished eating, it was the turn of the maids. The 3rd group was for the rest of the people, except for Hakuren, who slept until noon and sometimes missed her meal. In the 3rd group, the angel girls all had solemn expressions while working, but in their daily lives, they were just as lazy as Hakuren. They didn't know how to do housework. Laundry was left to the lizard boys, but they were very diligent in guarding and protecting the village. After saying good morning to the pets, Hiraku started working in the fields. Suddenly, he discovered black caterpillars eating the leaves. Luckily, the others noticed Bhutan, so there was no significant damage. To get rid of these caterpillars, Hiraku used a watering can from his multi-purpose farming tool. Now that the fields had been expanded, the work was much easier. Hiraku's work became more arduous, but looking at the crops growing day by day, he felt happy that his efforts had paid off. At lunchtime, Hiraku ate in the fields with everyone. He remembered how the girls used to have no habit of eating lunch or breakfast, because before coming here, they had never had a full meal. Sometimes, if they ate too much, some thought they might be kicked out, but now they didn't have to worry about food anymore. The granaries were always full. Occasionally, they would ask the merchants to sell off some of their lunch money. After finishing their work, Hiraku would continue his work. Now that the village had more manpower, farming was less strenuous. Thinking back on how they had only grown food before, Hiraku also planted flowers to add more color to their lives. Besides farming, he also made handicrafts for the villagers, even though he had never made wooden items like tables, chairs, or toys. Thanks to his versatile farming tools, he was able to make them. It was truly a blessing from God, he thought. He had to thank him that afternoon. He went to see where everyone was doing military training. Although it wasn't really necessary, the girls were all very diligent because they were worried that the food was too delicious and they wouldn't be able to wear their clothes anymore. Hearing that, Hiraku also worried about his body, so he tried exercising too. He kept exercising with his wooden penis, which made Hiraku feel bored, so he used his spear to blow it away. By sunset, the workday was over. That evening, the kitchen served Hiraku a new dish, honey-braised rabbit. He asked if they were confident it was delicious, and they said they were only 20% confident, but they still brought it out to serve because they didn't want to waste ingredients. So Hiraku had to eat all the food to avoid disappointing the maids. But then he realized that some people still found this dish very delicious, perhaps because not everyone has the same taste. At this moment, Flo announced that he had a letter from Yuri. She wanted to eat more apples and wanted. Zabuton Mei gave him a new shirt. Flaem thought the princess was a little selfish, but Hiraku happily accepted. After dinner, Hiraku went to the bathhouse to enjoy himself. Since the men's bathhouse was always reserved, sometimes if he was late, he would have to bathe with the other girls. After bathing, the next part was for Hiraku to rest, but this was the most tense moment. The air was filled with danger, as the fairy girls were communicating with each other to do something shady with Hiraku. Even after entering the room, he still felt like he was being watched, so he pretended to scream that he was in danger. The girls all came out, one after another. It seemed that ever since the incident with Du, the girls were always waiting to have their way with him. Although slightly uncomfortable, Hiraku still felt very happy. He secretly thanked God for giving him this life, and then fell asleep. At the village's distillery, the dwarves were working very diligently and enthusiastically. Hiraku imagined they would occasionally have a few drinks, but everyone was very serious about their work. They believed that drunkenness would never produce good sake. Even when Hiraku remarked that the sake was drinkable, they dismissed it as spoiled, discarding it to be distilled with fruit later and starting a new batch. This enthusiasm earned Hiraku's admiration. The dwarves also added that they wanted Hiraku to triple the amount of grapes so they could dedicate themselves fully to sake-making. At that moment, Senna rushed in, reporting a stranger in the village. Upon arriving, they found a man kneeling before Hiraku's statue of the supreme deity. The angelic girls and Jabuto were wary of him. Du also arrived and greeted her ancestor. It turned out he was the ancestor of the vampire clan, named Van Grade. He was also Du's grandfather, and upon hearing of Du's pregnancy, he had come to congratulate her. According to Van Grade, vampires have children through a blood pact with their master. Knowing that he was currently 4,000 years old, yet still as handsome as an 18-year-old, Hiraku was curious. Van Grade revealed that to live so long, vampires must erase a portion of their memories. Hiraku found this a little scary, but he said that if done regularly, they would get used to it. After a while, the progenitor greeted Hiraku, saying that he had been so captivated by the statue of God that he had forgotten Hiraku's presence. As the first vampire, he had also met God at birth, just like Hiraku, but due to having his memories erased many times, he couldn't clearly remember what God looked like. When he saw the statue of God, Van Grade was extremely delighted. He said that being near the statue made him feel lucky, and he wanted Hiraku to give him the statue. But Hiraku said it was a treasure of the village and couldn't be given away. After hearing this, Van Grade's face changed from delight to disappointment, so Hiraku promised to make him a new statue. After finishing, Van Grade knelt repeatedly in joy, concluding his visit. He then bid farewell to Hiraku and everyone else before leaving. He didn't forget to thank Hiraku for the safe delivery of Du and her child. After leaving the village, VR went to a church. VR was the church's leader, returning after 50 years. He told the church leader that there would be a major change today. When the leader questioned him, Vangra said he would place the statue in the main hall. Hearing this, the leader was very confused, as it would mean replacing the most revered statue in the place. However, upon seeing the statue of God sculpted by Hiraku, he was very impressed. He wanted to honor Hiraku, but Vang said he wasn't interested in that, so he would support him by reminding future generations to always remember Hiraku and the village of the Great Tree. Afterwards, Vangra sent a very luxurious-looking piano to the village, using the reason of celebrating Du's childbirth and reciprocating Hiraku's statue. He was truly a handsome and considerate person. At this point, everyone decided to place the piano in the village's large dining room. Seeing that it was a precious piano, the three office girls wanted to try playing it to satisfy their curiosity, as they might never get to touch something so high-class again. However, when they were about to try it, they all hesitated. As a result, no one dared touch the piano for fear of damaging it. So, they went to Hiraku and asked him for a cheap, old piano to practice on. Seeing the girls' longing expressions, Hiraku contacted Michael and asked him to send them another piano so they could practice, as he also realized that VR's piano was a very precious item and would be displayed. Because pianos were so popular, they enthusiastically practiced, even playing until late at night, preventing Hiraku from sleeping. Spring had passed, and the sunlight had become more intense. After absorbing the sunlight, the fruits and flowers would flourish even more. When Hiraku reminded everyone to rest, he continued with the remaining tasks. Seeing how engrossed he was in farming, Du also came to remind him to rest to regain his strength. She believed that even the healthiest body needed relaxation because overwork would inevitably lead to illness. Then, using magic, she created an ice cube for Hiraku's teacup. Seeing Du, pregnant, still exercising worried Hiraku, but she said that everyone had advised her to exercise so that her body wouldn't weaken. She added that among the maids, there was one who had once been a midwife. Seeing this, Du's childbirth was nothing to worry about. Hiraku and everyone else wondered what pregnancy felt like. Du replied that pregnancy was just like carrying 2 cabbages inside her, nothing heavy at all. But because of this, she couldn't drink alcohol and craved it, leaving everyone speechless. The next morning, the 3 guardian angels helped her petition Hiraku. Upon inquiry, they learned that they wanted to sell all the village's alcohol because they wanted to abstain from drinking for a while to ease Du's cravings. However, thinking about all the delicious food without alcohol was unbearable. Understanding their good intentions, Hiraku came up with a solution. Aging the alcohol for a longer period would make it taste much better, the most effective way to abstain from alcohol. Meanwhile, the dwarves were saddened to see that suddenly no one in the village drank a single drop of alcohol. Did everyone hate their alcohol so much now? Or so it seemed. But Hiraku said that everyone was abstaining from alcohol because they wanted to help Du, but once they finished abstaining, all the girls would be partying wildly. So he told them to produce even more alcohol, and life in the village gradually went on. Hiraku went to Du to inquire about her condition. Seeing her belly getting bigger, seemingly nearing her due date, everyone gave her many gifts. The group of angels gave her a snowflake to cool the room. Later, Ia gave Du a mountain herb to improve her health. Rusty gave Du her father's treasure, a magic-restoring gem. The maid Anne made pudding to nourish her, Hakuren brought apples, and Leah gave her a wreath. Flora finished making miso tofu soup, which both of them praised as delicious. The group of pets brought rabbit meat and baby clothes for Du to use when she gave birth, and the lizard tribe's brother volunteered to donate blood to give Du more strength. Everyone gave her gifts. This made Du very happy. At this moment, Hiraku noticed that the dwarves had given Du a hammer. He wondered what its purpose would be later. Just then, Du felt something changing in her stomach. It seemed she was about to give birth, so the girls prepared towels and hot water in Du's room. Sina was taking care of her, preparing for the delivery, while Hiraku was very worried because he couldn't be there to help Du. All Hiraku could do at this moment was go to the hollow of the large tree, the starting point of everything, and pray for everything to go smoothly. Time passed quickly, and soon it was dawn. Hiraku returned to Du's room and saw that she had given birth safely. Following everyone's advice, he gently took the baby from Du's arms. Holding the baby in his arms, Hiraku felt the baby's body was both heavy and warm, and noticed it was a little mischievous. Du said that it was just as active in her womb. Suddenly, the baby smiled, making her. Hiraku was overjoyed, and everyone congratulated him on becoming a father. At that moment, all Hiraku hoped was that the baby would grow up healthy and free from illness, unlike his father before him. But Du took his hand and said that they would both raise him. Just then, the baby started crying, leaving Hiraku unsure what to do. Following Du's suggestion, Hiraku named his son Anfei. He thought perhaps he belonged to the half-vampire clan. carrying his and Do's bloodline. Hiraku recalled the events since arriving here, thinking that a life as a farmer would be lonely and boring. But he had met many people, making life much happier. Not only had he become the village chief, but now he was also a father. He began to think about what he could do to repay the kindness of everyone in the village. The next day, he called everyone to the living room to announce that he would be adding a system to the village: reward coins. When the girls asked why, he said that these coins would be awarded to those who had contributed greatly to the village, and that they could use them to exchange for things they liked, or ask others for favors. Seeing that they resembled money, Hiraku said that sooner or later, the village would need currency. He then explained in more detail that all the food supplies would be handed over to Hiraku, and he would distribute them equally to everyone. Anyone who wanted anything could simply go to Hiraku, but because the value of different food items varied, they needed to convert them into currency for exchange. Flame and Leah understood quickly, as they had used money to buy and sell before, but Rusty and Hakurin of the Dragon Clan only used gold. So now, they understood how money was used. Hiraku thought that if he just distributed money, it would cause chaos, so he would use reward coins to experiment first. Thus, each villager received 3 coins, and these coins could not be counterfeited because they were made by his own hands. Hiraku created the coin, and soon after, people used it to exchange for various things to improve their lives. However, sometimes there were things the villagers needed that he couldn't exchange for. One day, a beast girl came to Hiraku with the coin and said she wanted a baby. Leah saw this and was about to call the police, but luckily, Hiraku refused in time. So, the request was exchanged, and Hiraku served her. A short while later, a celebration was held for Du's birth of her son, Anfet. Because she had abstained from alcohol for a long time, the girls drank heavily that night, but Du couldn't drink because she had just given birth. At that moment, the dwarf tribe brought a special barrel of wine to celebrate the couple. Using the hammer from the previous day, they broke the lid of the barrel together. This made Hiraku feel like he was cutting a cake to celebrate in his old world. Everyone then celebrated happily. Donoban came to raise a glass to congratulate the lady, but she couldn't drink yet because, while breastfeeding, his cheerful younger sister Flora wanted to make Unfei her son. The next day, at the Demon King's fortress, news arrived that a baby boy had just been born in the village. After some thought, they decided this was the best way to forge a closer relationship with the village. One person offered to marry his princess to Hiraku, but the Demon King refused. The merchants sent gifts to congratulate Hiraku. Meanwhile, in the village, Hiraku's beautiful life continued. More and more tribes immigrated, prompting Hiraku to consider building another village. Looking at everything he had gained since arriving, Hiraku thought to himself how happy he was to be living in this world. This is a great anime, and it ends here. Goodbye, and see you in the next videos.